Okay. Part 4 of Celebrian. Sexual content not for children under 18. Here we go. Last we left, she was doing horrible things. Let's continue more horrible things. Very well, cocksucker. Suck cock. That's a little bit repetitive. The king released her hair. Mouth wide, she eagerly bobbed forward and took his entire glans in oral embrace. Her lips wrapped to the lip of the glans. She felt the bulb, big as an apple, fill her mouth. Good Lord, that is so wrong. It warmed her mouth and sent more warmth to her pussy-cat. She pulled back, passing her lips and tongue over the bulb. Again she bobbed forward and took the bulb in her mouth, then back, in and out, in and out, in and out. Jaws stretched wide open to accommodate the pulsing mass, jaws aching but mouth fulfilled like never before. The king groaned in pleasure, but she did not hear. She saw only the bulb of the dick, felt only its warmth in her mouth and under her hands, heard only the welt slurp of her earnest work. She bobbed again, took the bulb once more in her mouth. This time she opened her throat, pressed the wonderful burning spear deeper. The magic draught still suppressed her gag, and she took the great bulb and shaft deep into her throat without pause. Swiftly she plunged down the rod until she buried her nose into the hair of the king's crotch. She smelled sweat and rancid seed. She felt the huge chicken fill her. Up her head rose again for air, then down again, then down deep. Again and again. Her pussy ran wet with her juices. Her mouth ran wet with her juices. What? She marveled at the great shaft and how it filled her, how the smooth glans lips passed her lips and throat, followed by the rough bumps and knobs of the gnarled shaft. Again and again she rose, gasped for air, and dove down. Finally, at the bottom of a downstroke, with the king deep within her, he came in a great torrent. It's a bit torrent. He came. He came in a bit torrent. Okay, nerd. He came so fast and full that she swallowed none of it. Instead, as she bobbed for air, as the great grey shaft pulled from her mouth, a flood of seed followed with it. Get out of the way! It filled her mouth with stickiness and salt. It spilled from her mouth, down her chin, splattered onto breast and chest. It ran down the straps of her garment, down her belly, and into the silver down of her pubes. For a moment she paused in surprise. "Oh, I didn't expect that to happen!" No, the great cock danced before her, no longer shiny, but dull and slimy with semen. A string of jizz stretched between the bulb tip and her lip. She watched great globs drip from the shaft and felt more globs fall from her face. She smiled? What? As if in response, the cock jerked again, spraying a fresh load of filth on her face, heavier than the first. That is not physically possible. It splashed into her open mouth and slid down her chin. A strand passed over her brow and coated her hair into a sticky mess. Spasm and spasm again of the great cock sprayed more and more mess onto her, until her eyes were plastered shut and her face covered with globby mess. Hot, stinking, wonderful mess. Blindly... I can't pronounce her name. Celebrian took the bulb into her mouth again, this time sucking and cleaning to remove every drop. Okay, now, Maxwell, was it Folgers? What is it? I forget which coffee is good to the last drop, but that's all I can think of is coffee whenever they say drop. She swallowed to the root of the shaft and cleansed with tight lips as she withdrew. She worked the bulb and shaft with lips and eager fingers until she felt it go limp. Bleh. She wiped her face with long, graceful fingers, cleaning each finger with her lips and tongue before wiping again. She felt no need to clean, only to gather every precious drop of the king's gift. Good to the last drop! When little remained on her face, she rubbed her breasts and belly, gathering more of the sticky mass and rubbing the remainder into a thick coating. Gag reflex. She wiped her eyes clear so that she could see. There was the king, sprawled upon his throne. His great cock lay limp on his thigh, still thick and massive, but not as thick as before. Well, that's nice to know. A string of drool hung from his parted lips. He smiled at Celebrian. "Well done, elf bitch, silver cocksucker. Well done for a first time. Perhaps next time will be better." Under the sheen of smeared semen, Celebrian's cheeks turned red in shame for not fully pleasing her king. But her memory still burned with ecstasy at the memory of the fill of the great chicken, and she thought with pleasure that she was promised another try. Her own sex burned in her loins. She longed for the king to fill her lower throat as he had filled the upper. She stared wistfully at his chicken while her finger unthinkingly found her labia. The hood of her labia was wet with seed that had run down her belly. She worked the moisture into her inner lips, around her clitoris, into her vagina. She worked her clit vigorously, eager for release. Small moans escaped her lip. Her vision had begun to widen so that she could see the great chicken stiffen again, and at the same time watch the king's rapt gaze at her twat. At last she felt climax near, her back arched. She moaned louder. No, sorry. She moaned loader and loader until sharp gasps filled the room. She had forgotten about chicken and king when suddenly the king lifted her up, spun her around, bent her over, and rammed his once again rigid member into her steaming pussy. She gasped in pain as the broad shaft penetrated her tight pussy, a pussy never before filled with such girth. She gasped in pain as he drove his cock deep to the end of her tunnel, knocking against the firm end. Out came the head, and then in again, in and out, in and out. Gasps of pain turned to screams of pleasure. Pleasure, as the great cock melted her pussy. Ow! It melted it! I'm melting! What a world! What a world! One of her hands cupped her dangling breasts, while the other returned to her clit to work in her pearl. She heard the king grunt with exertion, heard her own squeals of pleasure as if from a distance, felt herself fulfilled beyond torture dream of maidenhood. At last her body tensed in climax. Still the cock worked her pussy. In and out, in and out, her fluids lessening, the cock now tugging her skin and lips with each pull. When her squeal turned back to pain, the king came a third time. No flood as before, but more than Elrond had ever filled her with, much more. The king flopped his member, now slack again, onto her back, and let the last spurts of seed squirt up her back in long hot ribbons. Finally he stepped away, taking the thrice-piercing sword with him. She stood and felt the seed drip down her back and gush out her pussy. It ran down her legs. "Run away! Run away!" She no longer had energy to gather the mess into her mouth. She ached from mouth to pussy. Bruised, stretched, and even torn, the ache was sharp pleasure. Numbly, she allowed the king's orcs to guide her to a chamber where she fell fast asleep. And so we end there, good listeners. I am going insane.